make them cry.
Ivan
But
Blazin, is that
I think Ivan's a great guy, but Ivan's not a rock star. And Ivan, if you're watching this, I hope you won't be offended by that. I have a lot of regard for Ivan as a thoughtful, careful guy, but I don't know that he's going to have the same kind of emotional impact that somebody like Smuts or your dad would.
What's the biggest church here in Southern California?
The Loma Linda University Church.
And who's the pastor?
Randy Roberts.
And does he make people cry?
I don't think so. I think Randy's a very capable communicator, but he's a fairly low-key communicator. He's not, at least I don't experience him as somebody who's kind of playing on the violin of his congregants' emotions.
Right. How much do you think Adventist got exhausted from
Everything in the 80s,
Yeah.
Ford Davenport Ray.
I felt like I was in the middle of?
Well, whether I think
It has to have gotten exhausting for a substantial number of people.
I think that's right, and I think there were a whole host of people who undoubtedly said, "Okay, I've invested enough in fighting these battles. I'm going to go, with Candide and tend my garden." I think that's got to be right. And then I think for another generation of folks closer to our age, I think there was probably the experience of coming of age during that period and saying, so I could either plan on structuring my life so that I get caught up in these controversies, or I could do something else. And
Exactly.
I think there have been more people who've taken that second path. So it's not perhaps a matter of having been personally exhausted so much as observing the exhaustion
Right.
and opting for something else.
Yeah, it's very weird, like being in the center of it. And I mean, it's a very weird human experience in general, that what is of utmost concern to you is peripheral to almost everybody else.
Sure.
It never ceases to be.
But I mean, that's the story of human existence
Right,
generally.
right. That is. It is the story of human existence, that you've been caught up in your publishing, and it's peripheral to everybody else.
Right. I have no illusions that even after the book comes out that I've been working on, I'm not going to have people beating down my door asking for autographed copies. That's just the reality.
That's the reality of academic publishing.
Well, and honestly, I mean, even somebody who writes a piece of popular fiction or nonfiction that will be read by a couple of orders of magnitude more people than will read what I write, even that person may well encounter lots of people who have never read what he or she has written, and may not really care.
It's one of the most annoying things to deal with. Is I will walk around and sometimes people say, introduce me to someone. Hey, this is Luke Ford. And the person will say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've never heard of you." And like, what am I supposed to reply to that? It's like there's no good.
Right.
I don't want to justify, and say, "Well, this is why you should have heard of me." I mean, that's distasteful. But there's just like there's no great response to that.
Yeah, you're on the spot here now. Does your existence matter?
Right. It's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've never." Okay, but it's just so weird and uncomfortable. It's just, and I remember being like, because I was my father's son and the only child living with my dad during 1977 to 1984. Like I felt like, I was right in the middle of this maelstrom, and yet it was peripheral to, I hate to be so blunt. I hope this doesn't get you in trouble, but it doesn't get me laid. It wasn't like the
I'm
definition.
not responsible for what
He's
says.
not responsible for what I said, but to me, I hate to be so blunt, but this is just who I am. Like the definition of, one of the definitions of like rock stardom is that you can walk into a bar and women want to sleep with you. Now, of course, being godly people, we don't engage in that type of behavior, but that passion that gets engendered by controversy. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of women who wanted to sleep with my dad from this, and it's like that excitement.
Yeah, there's a certain kind of I mean, it's not sort of overtly erotic in the same way as Mick Jagger might be, but there's an underlying kind of, erotic tension there.
Because that's why so many clergy get in trouble.
Sure.
Because they have the opportunity.
Right.
Like your average schlub doesn't have the opportunity to get into a lot of trouble in that.
Right. I mean, what could be more erotic in a sense than the kind of vulnerability that people often experience to, the clergy person to whom they're bearing their souls.
Right.
And looking for guidance in a personal way. And then at the same time, this person is up front moving people's emotions and so forth. I mean, of course that's erotic.
Yeah, I remember I had this one particular rabbi, Mordecai Finley, and you always felt every Shabbos morning that he was talking to you. Yeah. It's like he unlocked my inner life like no other speaker I'd ever encountered. And for other people I know, my father does that. And it's so powerful, on some people.
Yeah, how would that not be erotic?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's weird. Like I would, I'd get kind of curious, like to figure out what type of people were so moved by my father, and which ones were unmoved, and which ones were repelled. Like, it's kind of interesting to figure out what's the type of person that is, so deeply, deeply moved to their very core by what my father is saying, so that they're absolutely devoted to him. Then others who it doesn't matter a whole heck of a lot. Then others who are like totally repelled. Obviously, the ones who are repelled would be on the traditional wing of Adventism, and the ones who are lackadaisical. This is actually easy to answer this question, because the ones who are lackadaisical with the lifestyle Adventists, and then the ones who are really excited with the evangelical Adventists. So I guess that was pretty easy.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that for people who had been through the same kind of, through a certain kind of formative experience in Adventism, and had hung on to that, I would think it would be enormously liberating to encounter an account of the gospel like your dad's. I think you're quite right. So that the people who were, people, if you will, for whom something like Luther's spirituality was very much alive, people for whom guilt and penance were issues, constant companions, who really needed liberation from certain
people who worried about their salvation, which I
Yeah.
totally don't get, but I guess there are people.
But again, I think it's clear that if that's where you're living, to be told, you can stop obsessing about this.
Just say it.
I mean, how is that not liberating? I think it's easy to see how, if that's the dynamic. If you've grown up in an environment in which you're told God is watching and looking for an opportunity to get you, nobody would ever say that, obviously, but I think that became the flavor of the experience that a lot of people had. To be given a different picture of divine grace.
How long do you think?
liberating.
How long is the half-life for that joy you just described? Because I can understand people being real excited about that for a few years, maybe, and some people are excited about that for 50 years. But I mean, you'd think after, you realize I'm saved. I'd have to think there's like a half-life of 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know, maybe 5 years, where 5 years later it's half as exciting, because you can't be excited by that.
The whole time,
I mean, that in the end, like life is prosaic again, and